Started the YouTube live stream. Can you all see me? Yes? All right. A couple of things here. All right. Share my screen. And let me bring up the chat. All right. Right. Just a reminder, if you are watching this on YouTube, remember to subscribe and you can just like the video and perhaps share it with others in the class. That'd be great. All right, so welcome everybody. Let's see, we are finishing up the 6th week in our course. We're heading towards the halfway point of this course, and we covered quite a bit of material. We started with just HTML, CSS, just to create some static content. We also then introduced jQuery and JavaScript ES6 to do some dynamic rendering. We introduced then single-page applications with React.js, and showed you how we can create a higher level abstraction so we can think about building web applications in terms of components that we can then combine to create ever more complex applications. We saw some of the challenges of maintaining state when we use the out-of-the-box state management that React comes with, right? That we can have a state variable that we can then share with our other components, our child components, and we saw that it could get fairly awkward having to shuttle messages back and forth between top-level components and sub-components. And just on Monday, we discussed Redux as being an alternative or a complementary mechanism for maintaining state, application-wide state. You can still use the regular state variable that React supports, but it's not a really good idea for maintaining application level state. It's fine if you are maintaining state within a self-contained modular component that wants to share local state with some of its children. That's totally fine. But for application-wide state, right, a better approach is to have the approach of Redux that allows components to subscribe or to pull the information that they want from that state, as opposed to having their parents, inject the state and create a dependency between these components, right? We saw that this allows us to have applications that are much more flexible, right? That we can start moving components around without worrying too much about any dependencies that component might have with their parent or where the layout where they appear. And so today we're gonna start covering an assignment that will give you a chance to practice this new technique. You will still you will still use the out-of-the-box state management from what we played around with in the last assignment. That still is valid, right? So we're going to keep that around, and you can still use that going forward. But again, it's meant for very modular, very well-defined interactions and dependencies between parent and child right? If it's in a limited, self-contained modular fashion, right? As opposed to an overall architecture where you want to maintain state for the entire application. For that, we prefer to use Redux. Okay. So yeah, so let's take a look at the assignment that's coming up, the assignment number 4, which will give us a chance to play around with this new technique. Before we do that, let's just go over a couple of administrative things. Just go over the syllabus. Make sure that we're aware of some upcoming dates, and so let's see. I did move the assignment number 4 so that it's today, and it'll be due on March 8th, right? So there it is. So there's a A4 Redux, and we're going to be spending Redux today, and we'll keep talking about it next week. We will keep talking about Redux. We will also talk a little bit more about React hooks and how, when would you use one versus another. Today we'll have a chance to play around with that a little bit. There will be a quiz next Monday that will be on React. So all the material that you've covered so far about component class components and functional components, right? Maintaining state, things like that, right? So that's on Monday. The assignment that went out today, it'll be due on March 8th. Okay, so that's the week of the upcoming first exam, right? So not next week. Next week there's no midterm exam, but the week after that, the week of March 8th, there will be a midterm exam, right? So that week, we're not going to give you an assignment so that you can focus entirely on reviewing the material for the exam. We will use that Monday to review the past exams. We'll review some sample questions, and then the first exam will be made available that Wednesday the 10th, and you'll have several days to take the exam, right? So it'll be available Wednesday morning, early morning, and then it'll be available for another 72 hours. Okay, so you'll have 3 days to decide when to take the exam. So you don't have to take it on Wednesday. You can wait a little longer. Keep practicing and keep going over some of the material. And if you have any questions, certainly you can come to the office hours if you have questions. And then so that would mean it would be 3 days. That would mean on, I guess, Friday, right? Friday evening it would be available. It will be available till Friday evening. So when we come back, right, depending on how we're doing on Wednesday, the March 3rd, right, if we have a chance to get started talking about RESTful APIs, we'll get started on Wednesday. If not, we'll push it off to after we come back after the midterm, depending where we are with Redux and REST. Nevertheless, the assignment number 5 won't go out until after the midterm anyway. But if we could pull that in a little bit earlier, that'd be great. If not, that's fine. We still have plenty of time. What else? Also, depending on how much review do we make headway in reviewing for the first exam, we might have some time to play around with a project prototype. What I'd like to do is to build for you a small sample of a little project that uses a third-party API and how to interact with the APIs that are not yours, that are somebody else's, and then create a small sample, a search screen and a detail screen, because a lot of the requirements around the project have been around using a third-party API and being able to interact with it and query it and retrieve data and then show detailed information. So I was hoping that Wednesday after the review, talk a little more about the project, talk about giving you an example of what we mean by being able to interact with a third-party API, retrieve data, show detailed pages and things like that. So So yeah, so all that is coming up. What else? I think that's it. Any questions? Oh, one other thing is that oh, it's not showing here. Why is this not showing here? Why this is not updated? Let's see. Does this update? Okay. Yeah. So the project will be due the last day of class. The last day of class, I believe that's Wednesday, the 21st. Okay. So that gives you a good. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, right? A good 8 weeks to work on the project. So that's a good two months, right, to work on it. So I see that a lot of you have already started, or a lot of you have come to me with questions about the project. That's great. I love to see folks already getting started with this. So I would get started as early as possible. You know, you should be considering creating some static pages just to see how it will the look and feel, how the style might look like, and some of the navigation, if it makes sense, and how it meets the requirements. So I would totally get started on that. All right. Let's see. Any questions? All right. So if there's no questions, I'm gonna get started with the current assignment. And as always, I'm gonna get you as far as I can without actually doing the whole assignment for you. We'll get you started. Why is this not? Wait a minute. Save. There we go. Okay. Okay. So this is the assignment. Okay. Let's talk about the assignment. All right. So this assignment is going to give us a chance to practice state management using Redux. Okay. Let's see. There's a question on the chat. Professor, what are types of questions asked for the midterm? So the questions are going to be very similar to what we've seen so far in the quizzes, right? They're mostly going to be fill in the blanks, multiple choice, and they're going to be automatically graded, right? And so pretty much what you've seen so far in the quizzes, right? We'll give you a snippet of code, and most of it will be a puzzle, right? And the puzzle might be, right, if I give you this jQuery, or if I give you this snippet on React or Redux, you know, what happens if I click on this button once and I click on this other button twice, right? And so you have to, you know, look at the reducer, or you need to look at the how the mappers are set up, and then you have to would follow the clicks, right? And then you would come back and tell me what it does, right? That I will ask you what this input field, what is this, what is the value after I click on this button twice and this other button 3 times, right? So a lot of puzzles like that, that only if you understand the flow of the data and events, and how it's everything's plumbed in React, or using React state, or using Redux. You know, if you fully understand it, then you would be able to answer those types of questions. But we're gonna go over that, and also some of the questions that are coming up in the quizzes are also going to be sample types of questions that you should expect in the midterm. Okay. All right. So this is the assignment for Redux, right? And so the learning objectives, right, is that we want to be able to use Redux integrated with React components. We want to be able to maintain state, even though it's a stateless components, right? So we're going to be using hooks for that, right? And we want to be able to navigate between multiple pages using the React router DOM, right? So we're going to be implementing we're going to be able to navigate between the course list and the course editor. Right now we can do that, right? We can go from a course list to a course editor. We can do that already, right? But the course editor right now, it's hard-coded, it's static, it doesn't do anything, right? So we wanted to now be we wanted to make it for real, right? We want to make sure that when you actually select a course, right, the modules that are displayed are for the currently selected course, right? If you select CS5610, right, you get the modules about web dev, right? If you instead select 5200, then you get the database modules and so on and so forth, right? So definitely we're gonna work on that. We're also gonna be able to navigate, you know, once you have a module, right? If you select a module, I want to be able to display the lessons for that module. If you select the lesson, you want to display the topics for that lesson, right? So how is it that we create the dependencies, right, between the multiple components, right? That if I click on one, the other ones need to re-update. So for that, we're going to ask you to use Redux, and you'll need to install Redux, right, using npm install like that, right, and React Redux, which we've already done that on Monday, right, at the beginning of this week. We have done this already, and also we ask you to implement the navigation following using React Router DOM, and we're asking you to use this mapping, right, you know, /courses layout, okay. Layout is the whether you're either displaying as table or displaying as grid. Notice that we're gonna have a placeholder there. See that? A placeholder, right? That can either be grid or table. And then we're going to encode, right? We're going to encode the ID of the course that we are editing. Okay, and so that we can have the module list. You know, we're going to learn how to read that parameter from the URL, right? And once we know the ID of that course, we can say, oh, we want to display the modules, right, for that course, right? So given this course, given this editor that we're editing this course, we're going to navigate to a course editor, right, which you should have already implemented in the previous assignment. So you're going to bring that and you're going to implement it in a file called courseeditor.js, okay? And it's going to be mapped to that URL, right? /courses layout edit course ID, right? So that's going to display the course editor. And it should display something like this, right? On the left-hand side, we're going to have the modules. On the right-hand side, we're going to have a tabs that display the multiple lessons. Then below, we have the topics, right? So that on the left-hand side, if you click on and you select a particular module, you'll display the lessons for that module selected, right? And if you click on a specific lesson, then you're displaying the specific topics for that particular lesson, right? So you can navigate, you know, ever deeper into more details, you know, going from the modules to the lessons, and then from the lessons down to the topics. In the next assignment, we're going to go from the topics down to the widgets. Okay, what's the next assignment? Right now, we're only navigating from courses down to modules, then from modules to lessons, and then lessons to topics. So we're going to focus on creating this navigation over here. Notice that all this is happening in the same component, right? In the course editor component, right? When you're in here, right, everything is happening in this same course editor, which is loading 3 components that are that somehow are related to each other, right? That if you do a modification on the module, right, the lessons change. If we make a change in the lessons, then the topics change, right? So they're all related to each other, but it's all happening inside of the course editor. Okay, so we'll learn how to do that. So this part on the left-hand side, this module here, the list of modules, is going to be implemented in a component called module list inside inside of the course editor. Inside of the course editor, we're going to have module list. I don't know if we need. I don't think we need module list. Yeah, it could just be module list. Yeah. So in module list, we're going to have a component called module list, right, which is going to render the list of modules for the currently selected course, right, which is encoded in this URL. So it's going to read from the URL the course ID, and it's going to go out to the server, and it's going to fetch the modules for that course. okay? And it's going to render them here, there on the left-hand side. Very much like we select all the courses right now, right? But right now we select all the courses, right? We're not talking about any specific course, right? But this time around, we are going to be able to select the course and then move on to the modules for that course. So somehow we need to create the dependency parent-child relationship, which we don't know how to do that yet, okay? We just know the list of all the courses, right? And we need to now learn how is it that we create one-to-many relationship. One course has many modules, one module has many lessons, one lesson has many topics, right? So how do we do that? So we're going to learn how to do that. So notice that at the bottom of the course of the module list, we have a plus sign, right, that allows us to just create a new module, right? Also notice that each module can be edited in place, right? If you click on the module, it becomes the currently selected module, right? And if you select that, then we're gonna load the lessons for that module. If you select a different module, it becomes the currently selected module, and you get a different list of lessons, right? Also, notice that it has a plus sign there. An edit, like a pencil. If we click on that pencil, these are changed, replaced with an input field that allows you to change the title of the modules, and then you can do it okay, or you can delete, right? And then the module's gone. You're very much like the course editor, right? The course list editor, same thing, but now for modules. Okay. Same thing for the tabs, right? The tabs going to do the same thing, right? You can select a tab, right? You can edit a tab by clicking on the pencil, and then the pencil that it replaces the title, right? Replaces it with an input field, an X, and an OK, right? And notice there's a plus sign at the end that allows you to add more lessons. Okay. Now, as you select the module, we're going to encode in the URL. We're going to encode in the URL the currently selected module, right? Just like when we selected the course, right? We encoded the currently selected course as part of the module, right? When you click on the module, same thing. We're going to encode in the URL. We're going to encode the ID of the module that is selected, right? And that's going to be used by the lesson component. The lesson component is going to take that module ID and say, I need to load the lessons for that module. Okay, right? So here it is. It shows here that the currently selected module should be encoded in the URL as it'll remember the courses that you're in, right? It'll then modules, and then at the end it'll be the ID of the module at the end. Okay. Same thing for the pills, right? When you select a particular lesson, right, we're going to encode the ID of that lesson as part of the module. We're going to append, right, to the current URL. We're going to append the lesson that you selected, right, that you've selected, and then so it's going to be encoded as follows. This is the encoding right here. So we're appending at the end right here. We're appending the ID of the lesson that you've selected. And we're going to load the pills, the topics, right? We're going to load the topics for the currently selected lesson. All right. All right. Notice that all these components have something in common, right? They're all using something that looks like this. See that? Like an input field, an X, right? An OK, a pencil. They all look the same. See that? Like an input field, an X, an OK, and a pencil. They all render the same way, like a little editor, right? Where you're iterating over a whole bunch of items, right? Whether the items are rendered as lists, they're rendered as tabs, or they're rendered as pills, right? Each one of them, each item, basically behaves the same way, right? I can edit it, I can change it, right? I can say OK, or I can delete it. Right, so this is a perfect example of using reusability, right? Creating a self-contained modular component that can grab all that behavior, right, and put it in one place. Instead of repeating that over and over, that behavior, instead we can encapsulate in one single place. Let's see, there's some questions on the chat. For several module lessons and topics can be selected simultaneously. So several modules and lessons and topics can be selected. No, you can only select one module at a time. You can select one lesson at a time. You can select one topic at a time. You can select module, lesson, and topic. Yes, right? You can select a combination of all three, right? But there's only one of them selected at any one time. This highlight over here, it's not that it's selected, it's that you're editing, right? So the selected one is module 2. This one you're editing, right? You're editing, so it changes the background showing that you're editing, but it's not actually selected. The one selected is this one over here. The several modules, okay. Why is edit course inside of layout? Instead of just courses. Let's see, you mean course says, all right, so layout is so that we can remember whether this was a grid or was this a table, right? And we want to be able to do a backtrack, right? We want to be able to go back, right? And still have encoded in the URL to know whether we are going to display either the grid or the table, right? Otherwise, you're going to lose that, right? And the back button would not work, right? So you have to maintain that state as part of the URL. We're also going to be learning that it's very important that we encode as much as we can, or as much as we need in the URL, right, to be able to recreate dynamically this page, right, given the URL. So we have enough information in the URL to be able to re-render the page based off of the state in the URL, right? So I should be able to, for instance, you know, if I navigate down to the module, the lesson, and down to a topic, I should be able to copy that URL, send it to somebody, right? Email it, and then when they click on it, they should be able to see exactly what I see, right? That a particular module was selected, a lesson was selected, and a topic was selected. They should be able to see exactly where I am. And the only way to do that is that you encode that state information as part of the URL, that then the application can then parse the URL and then recreate the content for you dynamically. Otherwise, instead of using URLs, you use state variables, or only state variables, then that state only lives in your browser, right? It's not gonna, there's no way for you to transfer that state to somebody else's browser, right? Only, it would be only in the URL you could do that. Okay, let's see, is there a question in the chat? Is there a limit to the number of modules, lessons, and topics that can be added? Not practically, right? In theory, you can add any number of modules, lessons, and topics. So the question might be, well, what happens when these lessons are so many that they don't fit? Well, they would just wrap, right? They would just wrap, you know, if they don't fit, it just wraps. Okay. All right, excellent. Let's see. So yeah, we're going to ask you to create a component called the editor component, the item editor component, item editor, right? That is going to be used, module lists. Oh, okay, no, that's, what? No, this is lesson tabs. Okay, yeah, I wrote it wrong. Yeah, so we're gonna create a component called item editor, right? Item editor that is going to allow us to edit either a module, a topic, or lesson, right? Instead of having to recreate that over and over for every one of them, we're gonna create one single component called item editor, which is gonna have the X, right, for deleting. It has gonna be the checkbox, it's gonna have the input field, it's gonna have the link, right? And you can pass it either a single module, you can pass it a single lesson, pass it a single topic, and it'll render it and allow you to edit it, right? So instead of having to recreate that and re-implement every time that for multiple times. Does it also allow us to display as another classes is selected if we change the URL parameter? Yes, you could. If you can definitely go back and select a different course, and you would be listed a different set of modules, lessons, and topics and whatnot. Yes, if you change the parameter and you know the ID of a particular course, right, it would re-update. Yes, Okay, so we do need to talk to the server. The server is going to be storing all this information. And so the same type of queries that you've been writing for course ID, right? And you're retrieving courses, deleting courses, updating courses, all that. Well, you're gonna need one of those for every single one of these types of information. So for instance, you'll need one for the modules, right? So there will be create module, find a particular module, update a module, delete a module, right? And you'll need one for lessons, and you'll need one for topics, right? Each one. So for this, you could copy and paste the service that you've been using for the courses. These will be almost identical to that. There is one wrinkle here, and that is that in the previous one, when we list all the courses, that list of courses, it's all the courses, right? It's all of them. Except here, when you navigate and want to display the modules, right? The modules, they exist as children of a parent course, right? So we need to be able to represent the fact that this is a one-to-many relationship, right? That modules don't exist in a vacuum, right? They exist as part of a course, right? So the way we're going to encode the fact that, you know, when you create a module, it's a module within a course, right? If you are retrieving all the modules, typically you don't want all the modules, right? You want the modules for a given course. So you need to be able to have a context, right, of saying, well, which modules do you want? For what course do you mean, right? So there are two methods, right? The creating a module and finding modules, right? That have to be within. They can't exist outside of a scope, right? If you're creating a module, it would always be within the scope of a particular course, right? Same thing when you find the modules, typically it's for a course. So you give me the course, right? And then I'll retrieve the modules for that course, or I'll create a module within that course. Now, some of them, there's some queries that do not depend on the context, right? Say I know the ID of a particular module. Well, I don't need to know that it belongs to a course, right? So these three queries, these three interactions with the database, right, with the server, don't need any context, right? You don't need to provide the course that it belongs to. You can use just the modules, right? And then you provide the ID of the module that you're interacting with, right? So if you want to retrieve a specific module, if you want to delete a specific module, if you want to update a specific module, right? You can use this URL without using this version, right, where you have to provide the parent course. Understand? So yeah, so these two need context. These three don't need context. Same thing for lessons, right? When you create a lesson, you create a lesson for a module, right? When you find a lesson, it's also within a module. Whereas deleting a lesson or updating a lesson, you don't need the context. So same thing for the lesson and same thing for the service. Let's see, is there a question? Is module ID unique through different courses? Yes, all these IDs are unique. Yeah, these are being stored in a Mongo database, and the Mongo always comes up with a unique identifier for everything. Okay. All right, so you'll need reducers, right? You'll need reducers. You'll need a reducer for handling the modules, right? For all the different things that you can do with the module, right? You can create a module, you can retrieve modules for a course, you can update a module, you can delete a module, right? And we'll write this for you, right? Today we're going to write this for you completely, right? We'll give you this code entirely, and then as we go, right, we're going to do less and less for you, right? We're going to maybe get you started with lessons, right, and maybe do half of it, and then we'll give you to do topic reducer all by yourself, right? So we'll give you plenty of examples on how to get started, you know, how to get going, right? And then, you know, obviously we're not going to do the whole thing for you, and then looking at the way we did it in lecture and the source code that we're going to provide you, right? You'll get a chance to do it on your own, right? Same thing for the user interface, right? We'll create modules. This module is, we'll create this entirely for you, right? We'll create this for you completely. We'll get you started with the lessons, okay? and then let you do topics all by yourself. Excuse me. Okay, there's a question on the chat. It says, could you tell me what are the advantages of using MongoDB? We'll talk about MongoDB and non-relational databases a little later, but in particular, it's one of the things that it's great about it is that there's no schema. Well, I guess depending if you're coming from a relational database and object-oriented world, right? Usually folks are big on schemas. Well, one of the big things about Mongo is that there is no schema, right? And so it allows you to work very well with unstructured data, right? Data that you don't know what the schema is, right? You don't know what the fields are, what their data types are. You don't know what the relationships are. So it allows you to be very, very flexible on the type of data that you're storing there and retrieving those data, and then where you can describe or identify those relationships later, right? And as you learn more about the structure of the data. So it's very unstructured, right? As opposed to relational databases that is extremely structured, right? You have to know the structure of the data before you start storing it. So anyway, we'll talk more about MongoDB when we get to non-relational databases. Could you remind why we call them reducers? So a reducer is kind of like a mapping term, right? That it's a function that is reducing a large set of states and actions into something much more terse, right? Or something much more minifies the results. Could you tell me what are the advantages of using? Okay, what are the advantages? Oh, okay, no. Yeah, all right. We answered that. Oh my goodness, it's getting hard in here. Let me take this off. Excuse me. Okay, so let's get going. Let's get going. So let's see where we. Oh, wait, did I finish this lesson? The services. Okay, the services, the reducers. Yeah, we'll need 3 reducers: one for the modules, one for the lessons, and one for the topic. Each one managing different portions of the page, right? Okay, let's get going. Let's see where we left off last time. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember to like the video and share it with everyone else. Okay, so let's see. Let's close this. Let's close this. And let's see, it's a React section 1. This is the React. There we go. All right. Okay, let's start this. All right, so we had started by creating a component that and a reducer to list a couple of modules. There it is. So remember that we had played around with this a little bit, and we had created a reducer, right? That had an initial state. Okay, so here's the reducer, and there's our state. Okay, there's our initial state, which is some dummy data, right, with some modules, and we had created a function that initializes state, right, and also an action. And the action, we would compare it against multiple different things that you can do with this data type, right? You can either add to the data type, you can remove from the data type, you can manipulate a particular item in the data type, right? Or by default, you just return the entire state, right? Which includes this array of modules, right? And then what we did is let me close this. We created a module list that the only thing that the module list knew how to do is just render a whole bunch of modules. If you passed it an array of modules, the thing that it knew how to do is just iterate over them and just display them, right? That's all it knows how to do. and then we connected it to the store, to the reducer by using the connect, right? And we determined two mapping functions. The first mapping function is responsible for retrieving from the state, right? Retrieving what is that is in the state that I want to get out, right? And then map it to a variable here, right? That a property here that you're expecting modules, right? And it's being injected, right? So connect extracts the part from the state, right? And then it maps it to a property that module is expecting, right? And we just need to configure what it is that we want to extract from the state, right? And then map it to a property that you're expecting, okay? And to do that, we got started in the module editor, right? In the module editor, right? In the module editor is where we created the provider, right? We grabbed the store for the module reducer, right? And we then created a store. We then provided that store down to all the components under here. In this case, we just have the module list, right? And the module list that just picks out the data that it wants, right? It extracts the modules from the state, right? And then just renders it. Very easy, very simple. Okay. So let's play around with this a little bit. Let's play around with this a little bit, right? So for instance, one of the things that we want to make sure is that, you know, we know we're going to be ending up with multiple reducers, right? One reducer is going to be dealing with the module list, and another reducer is going to be dealing with lessons, and another reducer is going to be dealing with topics, right? And somehow they need to be related to each other, right? Somehow, right? So let me show you how to do that, right? This is the first time that we're going to have more than one reducer, so we need to be able to merge, right, or combine those reducers into a super reducer, right? Into a super store, into one single state. Okay. And the way we're going to do that is that we're going to have multiple reducers. Let's create another reducer for the lessons, okay, for the lessons. So let's do that. It's going to look very, very similar, right? It's going to look very, very similar to the module reducer, right? The difference is going to be that instead of modules, it's going to have a whole bunch of lessons, correct? Right. So let's create the lesson reducer. Let's copy this, and we're going to call it lesson reducer. Lesson reducer. Okay, lesson reducer, right? I'm going to just change a couple of things here. So instead of titles for names of courses, I'm going to have lessons, right? So this is lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. All right. And instead of module reducer, this will be lesson reducer. Lesson reducer. And what else? And this is going to be, instead of modules, this will be lessons. Okay, initial state, action, yada, yada, yada. These types are going to be create lesson, delete lesson, update lesson, right? And the default state. And I am exporting lesson reducer. Okay. All right, excellent. And the who's going to render it, right? Who's going to render it in the where is it? Course editor. Where's the course editor? Or there's the module list. The lesson who's going to render this? The lesson, we're going to render it as tabs, right? So it's going to look very, very similar to this module list. It's going to be very, very similar to the module list, but instead of rendering as a list, it needs to render it as tabs. Okay, but other than that, it looks very, very similar. Okay, so let me just copy it. Let me just copy this module list. I'll copy it, and this will be tab lesson tabs. Tabs. Okay. So lesson tabs, here it is. And we'll call it lesson tabs, right? So lesson tabs, which is basically this up here, right? it's these tabs over here. These tabs. I'm going to render this as tabs, right? And this is lesson tabs, and I'm going to grab lessons. So I'm going to grab some lessons. I'm going to iterate over those lessons, right? And this is lesson 1, right? And the title of the lesson, okay? And presumably the state, right? Oh, I'm going to export this. Export this guy, right? And so in the reducer, I'm putting all my lessons inside of a state variable called lessons. There it is, right? So I'm going to extract from the state the lessons, and I'm going to map them to a property that you're expecting called lessons, right? So this is lessons. Okay, right? Let's see. There's a question in the chat. Could you please reiterate how the lessons array in the parameters works? Yes. So this over here, right? So let me put this. There might be multiple components or multiple arguments here. So let me just put this in a separate line like that. There we go. Okay. So remember, this here is a destructor, right? So presumably you're passing an object, right, that has many properties, of which I am extracting a property called lessons, right? Now, inside the syntax of destructors also allows me to initialize the property so that if the property is not there, if you pass me an object that doesn't have a property called lessons, right, then lessons would be undefined, okay? So this allows me to initialize it just in case you don't pass me anything, a property called lessons, and there's nothing for me to bind to. So this allows me to initialize and give it a default value, right? Because if this is ever undefined, then this would fail, right? This would try to map over something that's undefined, and you'll get an error, a big error saying map is you cannot map over undefined data type or whatever. Okay. So what this allows me to say is that if you don't pass me anything, this will try to at least iterate over an empty array, and it won't render anything. Okay, but at least it guards me from getting a big old ugly error message. Okay. Let's see. Is there a question here? And this works even when you pass nothing at all. Yep, exactly. Let alone an object with or without lessons. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even if you don't pass an attribute called lessons at all, right? You're declaring it locally as if it were a local variable. Okay, and you give it an initial value. Yep, exactly. All right. So how would we use this? Well, you would use this by going back to the course editor, and you can load their brand new reducer. So import the lesson reducer. There it is. And what you can do here is, instead of putting in the store, putting the module reducer, you could put in the lesson reducer, and you can render here the lesson tabs. The lesson tabs. There we go. Right. So let's see what we get. Notice that I'm not getting anything for the list, but I am getting lessons. Right. I'm not getting anything for the list because I'm not able to extract any modules. There are no modules in the reducer. There are lessons in the store, but there are no modules. So how do we render this? Well, first of all, we would like to render these not as a list, right? We would like to render it as tabs, right? So let's render as tabs. So in Bootstrap, you can look up tabs. Let's see how do we do that. You look up tabs, nav tabs. There we go. The rendering. There's an example here on how to do it. There it is. There's our tabs. So basically, you need to have this in the UL. So if we replace this in the UL like that, nav tabs, and then it would be LI. In the LI, we have nav item. So nav item. So the LI would have nav item like that. And then it would have to be inside of a hyperlink. In a hyperlink, then you have the title. Okay, so let's put the hyperlink. So let's copy this, and let's put a hyperlink here. And the actual text, what would be the lesson title, would live inside of the hyperlink like that. Very good. Okay, let's see how that renders. Let's see. Okay, so it renders. Notice that it renders as tabs. See that? Now, there are no selected tabs. No tab is selected. No tab is currently active. So we would still need to work on that, right? How is that we select one or the other? We don't know how to do that just yet, okay? And basically to activate and show that one is active, we would need to turn on this class active, right? So if you just see what it looks like, if we turn on active, where do we put the active? In the hyperlink. We put active. Notice that now they all render as active. So lesson 1, lesson 2, all of them are active, right? Obviously, we want just only one of them active, but we don't know how to do that just yet, okay? I'm just going to take that out. At least we know how to render it. Right? We know how to render it. We would need to know what the mechanisms of activating one or the other in a minute. We'll do that a little later. Any questions? Okay. All right. So we know how to render. We know how to render modules, or we know how to render editor, or modules or lessons. We don't know how to render both at the same time. So how do we do that? How do we want to be able to combine these reducers, both of the reducers, into one single thing, okay? So how do we do that? Well, there is a function, right? Instead of create store, you can combine the reducers. You can combine the reducers into one single super reducer, okay? So to do that, we can say const our reducer, our top level reducer is going to be a combine reducers, where you can put here an object. An object, it's a mapping function. It's a map function that is going to combine all the reducers into one single reducer, right? So for instance, you can say a module reducer, and then lesson reducer, colon lesson reducer, right? So this is creating a map that has key value pairs, key value, right? So that it's going to allow us to determine, well, which reducer do you want to use? Do you want to use the state that is stored in the module reducer, or do you want to use the state that is stored in the lesson reducer, right? Which one do you want, okay? So once you do that, you can use this reducer as the top level reducer and then provide it down here like that. You can say reducer. See that, right? Now what we've done is that we've broken everything. Now everything's broken. So if we come here, notice that the lesson tabs is not receiving anything. It's not receiving anything, right? And that's because we have moved the state of the lessons. We have moved it one level down. Okay, we have moved the state that is being generated by the lesson reducer. We've moved it down into an object, right? Into a sub object that is keyed off of lesson reducer. Okay, that means that any state that you want to extract, you'll need to use these identifiers for you to choose whether you want to extract the data that is being generated by the module reducer or the data that is being generated by the lesson reducer. Okay, so if we go back to the lesson tabs, right, we can fix that by saying, well, the state really, I don't want the top level state. It's the state within the lesson reducer, right? So we say state dot lesson reducer, right, dot lessons. See that? Okay, so we go back, now we got the lessons back. See that? We can do the same thing for the modules. Let's go to the modules. If you go to the module list, we can do the same thing. We can say state dot module reducer, right, dot modules, right? Because now they've been combined into one under the nomenclature module reducer. And now we have both. We have the modules and we have the lessons, okay? Same thing you can do for the topics, right? Each one with its own state, right? You can move them around. You can put them anywhere you want. Okay, you can put them anywhere you want, right? You can, if I go back here and I wanted modules here somewhere, I can just pop in that module list somewhere, right? Well, actually, no, because we don't have the reducer, right? We don't have the provider way up there, right? We have the provider down in the course editor, right? But anywhere inside the course editor, I can put it anywhere I want, right? As long as I'm within a provider that is providing me state from reducers, okay? All right, excellent. So any any questions here? Everything still with me? All right, so this needs to be laid out a little bit different, right? We want it to be laid out as this shows, right? Kind of like a 1/3 on the left-hand side and like a 2/3 on the right-hand side. That's easy, right? We've done that before, right? We can just go into the course editor, right? And we can use just grids to do that, right? We can create a high-level div with a class that is a row, right? And then we can create 2 columns, right? A left column, right? That is a column that of size maybe, I don't know, 3, okay? And then on the right-hand side, the rest 9, okay? So we can move the module list under the left-hand side, and we can move the module of the lessons on the right-hand side, right? And then we have our layout, right? We have the modules on the left, and we have the lessons on the right-hand side. Make sense? All right. So now notice that we don't really want these module lists and lesson tabs. You can remove that yourself, right? We don't really need any of that. Okay. So let's look at how is that we would implement, right? Being able to add new modules, remove modules, edit modules, right? So let's see if we can take a look at that, right? Right. So let's start off with being able to add new modules, right? Let's add new modules. Right, so let's add like a plus at the bottom of this, right? So for instance, in the module list, right, we're rendering the modules, and we have this list item being added one after another. Well, we can add another line item at the bottom. We can add another line item at the bottom with the same styling, and maybe we can put a plus sign here, right? So class FAS, FA plus, and maybe make it maybe a little bit big, like 2x or something, right? So we can put like a big plus sign there. You can center if you want. Let's see, okay. And then if we click on this, what I'd like to be able to do is add a new module, okay? So let's take a look at that. How do we do that? And so basically, we want to be able to add a new module. We want to add a new module. So how do we do that? We want to be able to do what? We want to be able to go to the reducer, go to the module reducer, and invoke this kind of like this create module, right? This create module. And we know how to handle create module, right? Basically, we need to be able to look at the old state, right, which is this array of modules, and we need to append, right, at the end of this array, we need to append a new module, right? We know we need to do that. I mean, we've done it for the courses. We would do the same thing here, okay? But somehow we need to invoke this over here. We need to invoke this create module. We need to invoke this over here, right? So how do we do that? How do we do that? Let's do like an alert here. Right, create module. We want to invoke this. We want to invoke this create module, and then inside of this create module, we would do whatever we need to do. Right. So how do we do that? How do we invoke create module? Well, we learned, right, that we need to do that by somehow invoking this dispatch. Right, this dispatch is what invokes that reducer. Right, and we need to invoke it. We need to call the dispatch with an action, right, whose type is create module, right? Somehow we need to do that. So notice that the dispatch to property mapper is being passed to us. So somehow we need to map and invoke an on-click on this icon, which is somehow invoke this dispatch. How do we do that? Well, what we can do here is that we can create a property. Create a property here. We can create a property that we can invoke. Somebody can pass us a function, create module, somebody can pass us a function that we can then invoke whenever we call it, whenever we click on this. We can say, so on click, we want to call the create module, right? This create module. So somebody needs to pass us that function from outside as a property create module. Well, we know how to do that, don't we? Right? We do that with the dispatch to property mapper, right? We need to map. We need to create a map here. To create a map. Oops. We need to create a map that maps this create module. Create module maps it to a function. To a function right here. Right, and here we can say alert create the module. All right, so this create module is what you're expecting that we pass you. Who passes it to you? Connect passes it to you. Connect passes you the property that you're expecting that it's bound to this function, right? And now module list gets the function right here that you can then invoke. Well, let's see. Click on it. There it is. See that? Create this module. Right? Create this module. Okay. But really, we don't want to do this alert. We really want to call this dispatch. Right? We want to call the dispatch, and we need to pass an action that has a type of what? Of create module. Right? And now it's going to invoke this reducer, passing the action whose type is create module, and it's going to alert this, hopefully, right there. All right, so let's try it again. There it is. See that? Create module. We are invoking the alert inside of the module reducer. That makes sense? Okay, so we're here. We're perfectly where we need to be. Okay, say okay. So basically, we need to now, in this create module, we can push a new module in here, a dummy module, right? A dummy module. So how do we do that? Well, we could do it in several places, right? There's several places where we can do that, but it has to be done. It can't be done. The actual module that well, let's see. I guess it could be done here, right? Yeah, we could do it here. Right, so here let's create a dummy object. We can say const new module, right? And in the title there'll be new module, okay? And the ID, okay, this ID I'm going to put it in here, right? Only because we don't have a server yet. We're not storing this in a permanent server. But remember to remove this, right? If you leave this here, it will break the generic server, right? I'm going to put it in here for now, but remember to remove it, right? Whenever you are, when we connect it to the server, we're going to remove this underscore ID. Don't forget it, right? So I'm just going to create here a dummy date and get a timestamp, right? Just so that we have a unique identifier. Once we have the new module, we're going to append it to the state. So we're going to return a new state that has the old modules. I'm going to copy the array of modules. I'm going to copy the old array of modules. Well, I'm going to copy the entire state first. I'm going to copy the old state, which includes the modules, right? I'm going to override the modules so that it's going to include all the old modules. And at the end, I'm going to append this new module. Okay, notice the use of spreaders, right? This first spreader over here is copying the entire state. I guess I don't need this. So if there were, because there's only modules in here, because there's only modules, I could get away with this, just that. Okay, this is enough because the only attribute in the state is the array of modules. Okay, but if I had other things in here, whatever, other pieces of data, right, that I'm keeping track of, right? Then I need to make sure to copy them over as well. Copy copy the old state, right, which includes, right, modules, includes, other garbage that I have in there. Make sure that you copy that so that it's still in there, because I don't want to we're not modifying them, right? They're not being changed. What's being changed is the modules, right? That's why I am so I'm copy everything over, plus I'm going to override the modules after I've copied over the old modules. I'm going to override the modules so that you have the old modules at the beginning and then new modules at the end. The very last module is going to be at the end. Okay, so I'm creating a brand new state. What happens with that state? It's being returned. It's going to go to the provider. The provider is going to put it in the store. The store is going to find its way down into the module list, and the module list is going to grab the modules that includes the new item, right? Includes the new item, and it's going to map it into the module list in the modules array, and then it gets re-rendered, right? Whenever there's a stage change, right? Whenever the return returns a new state, right? It trickles down to everybody who needs it, and then everything gets re-rendered. All right, let's try it out. Let's do plus, and there it is. See that? We're adding new modules. Everybody good? That makes sense? Okay. All right. How about removing modules? How about removing modules? Okay. So removing module. Presumably we might have maybe at the end, right? This at the end of this module list, you have the line item, right? Where you have the add at the bottom, and here we have the title. Okay, we have the title. Now, this line item that we want to render. Okay, this line item that we want to render. This right now we're only rendering the title, only the title. But this is going to get complex really quick, right? We want a whole bunch of things in there, right? We want an input field, right? We want a hyperlink in there. We want a delete button. We want a save button. We want an edit button. We want it to be toggled between editing and not editing. So this is going to look fairly complex, right? And excuse me, and it's the same behavior. The same behavior we're going to have to recreate again for this guy over here, right? This hyperlink over here. We need to recreate it here for the lessons. Okay, so instead of implementing it twice, right? One for the modules, one for the lessons, and then again for the tabs, right? What we're going to do is we're going to try and create a single component, right, that can be used in anywhere where you want to edit something. Okay, we can reuse in multiple places, right? So that's kind of like the beauty of using reusable components, right? So that you don't have to recreate the same piece of code over and over, right? And it is the software engineer's responsibility, right, to identify these opportunities for reusability, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to create an item editor. We're going to create an item editor, new, and this is in a new JavaScript. We'll call it the item editor. I spelled it wrong. So refactors the item editor. Okay, and it's going to be just a React component. Okay, and it's going to be a function, const item editor, that we're going to pass it presumably an item. Okay, and it's going to render as what? right? So here, what should I use? Should I use a div, an li? What should I use? Well, I don't know, right? Because this is going to be a component that is going to be used somewhere else, right? Generically. And so I don't really know if I even should add anything here. So React allows you to use the anonymous tag, right? A tag like this that doesn't have a name, right? And what this allows you to do is, I do not want to add any sub element underneath. Okay, so it's as if I would be added, directly to my parent, right? Without any sub element, any divs or spans or anything like that, right? So it allows you to create an opening and closing generic anonymous tags, right? Which doesn't add any extra layers of DOM in between. Okay, let's see. Is this is editable item a better name? Ooh, I like that. I like that. Yes. Let's sorry, English is not my native language, so yeah, let's do that. Let's rename this as editable item. Very good. And let's rename this editable item. Okay, very good. All right, so let's keep it simple for now. Now there are a couple things that we need to assume, right? We'll assume that items have a title, right, and at least they have an ID, right? Let's assume that. Although you could still make it even more generic, right? You could pass me as an argument, you could pass me as an attribute. What is it that you want to render, right? A title, the date, the owner. What do you want to render? But let's not make it that generic, right? Let's assume that it is a title that we want to render, right? So for now, let's just do item.title. Okay, and now I can export this. I can say, default export default editable item. Right. So now I can go back to my module list. Right. I can go back to my module list, and here, instead of saying module title, I can say I'm going to render the editable item, right? And the item is my module. I'm passing you the module. Make sense? And same thing I can do in the lesson tabs, right? The lesson tabs, I'll do the same thing, right? So I'm going to say that the editable item, and we'll pass in the lesson. Right? Notice that this renders identical like before. Nothing has changed, right? They both are just rendering the item title, right? And I can add here just the same like anything else. Okay. All right. Okay. So, but because you have this editable item, now whatever I do to this editable item happens to all the lessons and the modules and the topics everywhere, right? For instance, what I would like to do here, maybe I want a input fields, right? I want buttons, right? So let's add them, right? We need we need an input field, right? We need what else do we need? We need icons, right? Class, FAS, FA, check mark, right? We need that. What else do we need? We need times for removal, for deleting things. We need let's see, what a pencil to edit, pencil. So they are, right? So we got oh, I guess not pencil. We don't have pencil. Maybe not. I thought we had pencil. Edit, maybe. Let's see. Okay, something looks like a pencil. And obviously we would need to make sure that certain things appear or not appear depending on what it is that we want to do. Okay. Probably we also want these guys to be hyperlinks, right? We want these to be link, right, to be able to navigate, right? So instead of being the title, probably we want like a link here, right? So this is a link, right, to something we don't know yet, right? Let's put something just slash for now. Right, if we do that, we do that, the lesson tabs, we won't need this hyperlink here, right? Because the hyperlink, we've moved it inside of the editable item maybe, huh? So maybe we don't need this here. Let's see if we can get away with that. There we go. Okay, so notice that these are our hyperlinks, right? Everything's a hyperlink, and they're rendered perfectly. Excellent. Now we need the logic, whether certain things appear, disappear, and things like that, right? We can use hooks for that, right? Well, if this was a class, we could totally use the state variable, right? And do the event handlers, right, to change the state, right? And in the editable, right, we could, if this were a class, we could totally use a state variable and, toggle whether we're editing or not editing and things like that, right? But, let's leave it instead, right? Let's instead use a new technology that we introduced temporarily. We introduced it briefly earlier this week, right? We're going to use hooks. So hooks is a mechanism that allows us to maintain local state, right? Without having to use our React state that we need a class for that, right? So let's bring in one state. It's going to call use state, and use state is going to allow us to toggle or keep track of different things, right? Whether we're editing, we're not editing, things like that, right? Now, to use this use state, we do need to change this syntax just a slightly bit, right? We do need this to be in a parenthesis, in a curly bracket, right? And this needs to be in a return. This needs to be in a return. Other than that, there's no bigger change, right? No bigger change like that, right? Okay, because we're gonna need a couple things here, right? We're gonna need to add new lines, right? Now the use state, okay, it's a hook that allows us to maintain local state, right? And you can create each state using many use states, right? So for instance, one of the things that we want to remember is whether we're being edited or not, right? So we can say const, are we being edited? So edited, right? And we also need a mutator that allows us to change this state. So set edited, okay? And use state initializes these two parameters, these new variables, these new constant parameters, right? With initial value for our state. So we could say false. I would say, are we being edited? No, we're not. By default, we're not being edited, right? So now we can use that state to decide what we want to show here, right? What is that we want to show? Well, if we are being edited, I would like to show the input. I like to be able to show the check mark and the times, right? If we're not being edited, I want to show the link and the edit. Right, so let's put these in the right order, right? So let's put them in separate parent items so that we can either show one or the other, right? So let's do an anonymous element that wraps these two. Okay, and another anonymous around these two. Okay. That wraps these three. And now we can decide, well, if you're editing, I want to show this down here. But if you're not editing, I want to show these up here. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do that logic. So if you're not editing, right, I want to have this content, right? Oh, did I spell edited? Sorry, I meant editing. Editing. Okay, editing. There we go. Editing. But if you are editing, I want to show the other part, right? So are you editing? I'm going to show this part. Okay, makes sense, right? So now notice that we just have all the pencils, right? So it's not being edited at all. Right, let's see, a question here. Since HTML is already inside of JSX, brackets, what's the benefit of the, well, because we want to group these three things, right? Because the and here accepts only a single element after it, so it evaluates each individual. Since we have three things together, right, we need to group them, and I don't want to put a span or a div or anything like that. I want to show these three out and not necessarily inside anything, right? So that's why this, right? It's not inside of anything really. All three are added or all three are removed, individual as opposed to one thing, okay? So we want to be able to toggle. So edit, if you click on edit, so on click, if you click on this, we want to call set editing to true, right? Let's see. So if we click on here, notice that it changes. See that? They all change individually so that we can edit each one of these. If you instead click on check or times, say check, right? If you click on check, right, we want to set editing to false, right? So now we should be able to toggle between the two. We say okay, right, and it goes away, right? So I can now toggle between the two. All right, that's it. There's a question in the chat. Is adding a span better? No, not particularly. It's just I didn't want to add additional DOMs unnecessarily, right? Especially for styling. You know, when you're going to style and you want to be specific about the item that you want to style, you know, adding additional DOM elements makes it harder to be specific about what is it that you want to style, right? Especially if these are unnecessary DOM elements, right? That just complicate the DOM structure. Okay. All right. Excellent. So we know how to do that. Well, now we can start thinking about how do we, how is it that this editable item interacts with the parent? Well, for one thing, when we add the input field, when we manipulate the input field, notice that right now it's empty. See, it's empty. Okay. We would like to input field have the value of the item. So we could do the following. We could say input the value has the item dot title. Okay, so that if we edit it, notice that indeed it changes it, right? It has the value, but the problem is that we can't edit it. We can't actually edit it because, right, we need to change the state, right? But we can't change the state of the item title, right? Because it's a property. Somebody's passing it to us, right? We can't change it, right? So instead what we're going to do is that we're going to copy it locally into a local cache, right? So that we can edit locally the value, right? And then when you say okay, we can send it back to you, right, with the new value, right? So we're going to create another variable here, a item cache. Right, so set item cache, right? That's going to be a local copy of our item, right? So the initial value would be the item itself. So I'm going to copy that item into a local version so I can now manipulate it any way I want. Okay, so this is going to be the input is going to be, instead of item, it'll be the item cache, right? So now, it still works the same, right? It edits it, and I still can't edit it, but because now I have a copy of it locally, right? I can change it. I can modify it. I can say const. Oh wait, no, I already have it, right? I have a set item which allows me to manipulate and change that item cache, right? So I can say that as I type, so on change. So as I type every single keystroke, right, I'm going to get the latest value of the input field, and I can modify the cache. I can to be a new value. Whatever the old value was, which is item cache, but I'm going to override the title to be the event.target.value, right? The latest thing that I've typed in the input field. Okay, so if I go back now I can edit it, right? So I can now edit it. I would say, okay, nothing's happening, right? But the item cache is being edited. Right? So somehow I need to notify somebody above me, hey, this has changed. We need to make that change permanent. Okay, not until the reducer knows about it, not until the reducer knows about it, right? And we have permanently changed it in the reducer, will the changes actually take place? Somehow I need to replace here, right, the actual state, and the whole thing would re-render, right? So we need to tell our reducer that indeed the state has changed. Let's see. Could you tell me what those ... item cache does? Yes. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So editable. Okay. So the ... right, is called the spreader operator, right? And what it does is it can copy objects. It can copy arrays, right? That's what we did here in the reducer, right? When we were creating the new modules array, right? This is copying the elements of an array, and it's spreading them out, okay, to generate a new array. Right, so this is copying all these three elements, right, and just putting them there one at a time. Yes, and then comma, we are adding a new one. Okay, now this is for arrays. For objects, if this were an object, well, here there's an object. See that? That's an object. So the spreader operator, when it's applied inside of an object, what it does is that it copies every item in that object. Okay, so in this case, we only have one item. Well, actually three: modules, ASDF, and these two garbage elements. So it's copying all those three as the properties, and then comma modules, because modules has the same name as a property that I just copied over, right? This means that I'm going to override what you just copied, and I'm going to replace it to whatever the new value is here. Okay, so this is exactly what we're doing here. We're saying I'm creating a brand new object. Okay, this is a brand new object. It's going to have, I'm going to copy over the old stuff that item cache had, right? Which initially will have what? Initially will be just the item, right? Which will have the title and the ID, right? So I'm going to copy all those over, and copy that over, but I know there's a title attribute in there which I want to override, right? And I wanted to have the value of whatever the input field that you as you type, right? That's inside of the target, event.target.value has the latest value of my keyboard stroke. So I am overriding the title with the new value of the input field. Okay, and so I am replacing the old item cache with this new one that has a new title. But this is only happening here locally in my editable item. I need to tell the world up there, right, that this item that you passed me, I have a new version of it, right? And you should update the one that you passed me, right? However you're doing it, I don't care, right? I'll pass it to you and tell you, hey, this new one has changed. Here it is. So how do we notify the outside world that our local cache has changed and that you too should change, right? So how do we do that? Let's see, is there a question on the chat? Okay, I believe we did use it when we made module and lessons. Yes, we did. We did indeed. We did. Yep. We haven't used Redux yet right here. No, we haven't. Well, we did not in editable items. Not in editable items. No, we used it in the when we created the lesson reducer and we created the module reducer, and now we want to be able to communicate and say, hey, we just updated. So somehow we need to be able to tell reducer. We need to come back to the reducer and call this update module right here. We need to call this update module because the module title, we just changed it. So somehow that editable item down there, right, we need to go up and tell this guy that we have updated it. So how do we do that? Let's do that. Okay. So how do we do that? Okay, so one way of doing it, right? We could tie this to the reducer, right? We could tie this to the reducer, right? And this could notify the reducer that it has changed. The problem with that is that this editable item is being used in multiple reducers, right? So which one? Right? So instead of putting that logic here, well, let's put it in our parent, right? Our parent is the one who's editing us, right? This module reducer, where is it? Module list. Module list is iterating over us, and we want to be able to notify the reducer that something changed, right? So what we're going to do is the following, right? We're going to do is that we're going to expect you to pass us. You're going to pass us. Oops. You're going to pass us a function where we can notify you that the item changed, right? That the item update. So item, or update item. Okay, so it's a function that you're going to give us, and we're going to use to notify you, call you back with the new version of the item, and you do whatever you want with it. Okay, I'm just going to notify you that it changed, right? And so here in the set editing false, right? When we say check mark, in the check mark, right? What we could do is that not only set the editing false, but we are also going to call the update item. I'm going to pass the latest version, right, of the item cache. Right? I'm going to pass you, whoever wants it, right? Here it is. I'll notify you. If you pass me a function called update item, I will let you know that this has changed. Okay. All right. Excellent. So let's pass this. Right. We're going to pass you here a function update item, so you can notify me, right, of the new value. Right. So for instance, if I pass you a function right here, right, you're going to pass me the new item. Right. So let's put an alert here. Alert new item. I'm going to pass you that function. Let's see. Let's refresh. Okay, so I change it. Let's say okay. There it is. Well, it's just give me an object, right? Presumably the title changed. So let's do the new item dot title. So let's change this. Say okay. There it is. See that? So it's passing me the new object, right? With the new value, with the new title. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. Right. So now that I have the new item, somehow I need to plug it to you right here, right, and pass you and call a dispatch with an update module, right? I need to pass it to the dispatcher, right, so I can come into the reducer and make the change of the state permanent. Somehow I need to change in the array. I need to change that specific item. I need to replace it with one that has the new title, right? So how do we do that? Okay, well, I'm going to create here a function, right, that I'm going to pass you update module, right, that I'm going to tie the update item. I'm going to tie it to update module here. And I'm going to pass it to you right here. I'm going to pass it to you, update module, right, so that I'm getting the new item right here, new item. Right, so they can do the alert down here, right? So new item dot title, right? And the new item dot ID as well should be in there too, right? So let's see if that works. Okay, there it is. Let's refresh. Let's refresh, see if this works. Yes, I'm calling that alert, right? I am calling that alert in here, right? Because I've been mapped to, right? This update module is being mapped to this update module, and it's being invoked when the update item gets called, and it passes the new item. Okay, and we need to instead of doing it here, we're just going to pass it to the dispatch. I'm going to call the dispatch. I'm going to call the dispatch, and I'm going to update module, update call the update module, right? So in the update module here, right, we're going to do an alert, right? Update the module, right? So that if I click here, right, and I type the value and I say, okay, notice that it says update the module. So I'm calling that reducer, right, to update the state. Yes, but I need to pass it the new data. I need to pass it the new item. How do I pass it the new item? Well, here in this object, the action object, the only required attribute is type. Type has to be there, otherwise this will fail, right? But I can pass other things. Right? Not only do I need to pass the type, I can pass other things that I want, right? So what I can say is that the new module, right? The new module, I'm going to pass it the new item, right? So this could be new module, right? New module or updated module, Okay, I'm going to pass it to here so that here I can actually grab it in the action. It's part of the action object, and it's called what? Update module. Dot update module, right? Dot title. Okay, let's try it. So here's 3200. I'm going to type it and say okay. There it is. See that? So the reducer is getting the new object, right? The new data that I just edited, so that I can now recreate the new state, right? I can do the same thing that I said I did earlier, right? I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier, right? I'm going to recreate the state. I'm going to recalculate the modules, right? But the modules now is going to be what? How do I calculate the new modules? Basically, what I want to do is iterate over all the modules and replace one of them. I want to replace the one whose ID matches. I want to replace it. So how do I do that? Well, I can use map. I can take a look at the old state modules. I can iterate over them. And as I iterate over each module, I'm going to ask myself, if the module .id matches the ID of the module in the action, which is called updated module, right? ID. If it matches the ID, then I want the new module. I'm going to return action.update module. Otherwise, I want the original module, right? So I'm going to say return module. Right, what this does is that it's iterating over all these arrays, right? If it finds that the ID matches the ID of the module I just modified, then I don't want this old module, right? I don't want this original module. Instead, I want the new module with the new title, right? That's what this if statement does, right? If it's the same ID as what you've just updated, then I want the updated module. Otherwise, just keep the old one, okay? All right, so let's try it out, see if this explodes. So 3200, you can click, right, and can type the edit and say okay. Notice that indeed we have edited, right, these over here, right, and I can edit another one here and say okay. See that? Okay. And so we can totally do the same thing for the lesson, right? Using exactly the same implementation, right, for both, okay, and then for that, I'll let you do that yourself. Although let's do one more thing. Let's do one more. Let's do the delete modules, okay? I know I'm almost out of time. If you need to go, feel free to drop off. But I'm gonna do the delete module, and then I'll stop. Okay, but I'm going to stay for a couple more minutes so I can do the delete module. Again, feel free to drop off if you need to go. Okay, so delete module, that means that in the editable item, we're going to have a delete, right? A times here. We want to remove, right, the item that you passed us, right? So how do we do that? same thing. We're going to pass you a function so you can delete item, so that we can pass you back the item that we want to remove, right? We can say that if you click on this, if you click, right, we're going to call the delete item, and I'll pass you the same item that you gave me, right? That's the item that I'm going to return to you, right? Which has the ID, right? It has the ID of the object that you're removing. Then in the module list, I can tie that up. I can say, I can connect, right, a delete module that you're going to pass me. You're going to pass me this delete module. I'm going to pass it down to my child here, delete item, right? And then I can connect the delete module here. Delete module. You're passing me the actual module that you want to remove, module to delete. Okay, and I'm going to pass it to a dispatch, and the type is that I want to what do we call in the reducer? Delete module. There it is, delete module. Right, so we'll delete the module, and the module to delete is the module to delete. Module to delete. Okay, so that back in the reducer, right, I'm going to be in here, and I need to recalculate. I'm going to call this guy. I'm going to recalculate the state, so that I'll recalculate the modules, so that it's all the modules that I had before minus the module, right, that you just removed. Okay, so basically it's return, the old state, right, and the modules is going to be looking at the old modules. I'm going to filter, and if the module is I'm going to say, if the module ID is equal to the action dot, was it? So this is the action object, right? This is the action object, and it contains module to delete. So action dot module to delete, if it's equals the same ID of what you're removing, right? So sorry, if it's not, if it's not, right, then I return true. True meaning I want to keep it, right? Otherwise, if it is equal, then return false, meaning I don't want it, right? So skip over it, right? So filter uses a function that if you return true, you keep the value. If it returns false, you skip over that value, right? So let's try it out. So if I k 3200 and I click on the X, almost worked. Okay, I think I need to clear this value. Say okay. All right, it almost worked. I need to fix it a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to share this code with you, right? If you want to use it to get started on the assignment, right? You can get the modules going, the lessons going, right? You can get the topics going, right? And when we come back next week, right, we're going to learn how to tie all this with the server, right? Because at some point we need to be able to, save all the stuff to the server, retrieve data. We need to tie it also with the course editor, right? When we select a particular course, we want to, load all these modules for that course, and so we'll think of how to connect all these things. All right, folks. Thank you. Remember to like the video. Bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
I just have one question before you leave. Earlier in the class, you mentioned that we would be having our next quiz on this coming up Monday. And it says that on the syllabus also, but on Canvas under quizzes, it says it's open on March 3rd, which would be Wednesday. I just want to make sure that we should be going by the March 1st date as opposed to the March 3rd date.
Yeah, no, March 1st. I'll change that. I'll fix that. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Professor.